Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this public information meeting on the proposed source control regulation bylaw. My name is Adam Doolittle. I am the communications coordinator here with the District of Tofino, and I will be facilitating tonight's meeting. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional unceded territory of the Tolokwit First Nation. We recognize and respect their deep connection to the lands and waters where we have an honor of living and working. In attendance today, again, myself, I'm Adam Doolittle. We have Simon Kirkland, the Manager of Infrastructure and Capital Projects with the district. Up top, we have Keegan McCall, the Manager of Legislative Services, who will be facilitating our online discussion today. And in the back, we have Aaron Rogers, who's observing our Director of Infrastructure and Public. Before I give Simon the floor, there's a couple housekeeping items I'd just like to review. Emergency exits. In the unlikely case of an emergency, there are 3 exits from this room. There's one right behind you guys here. There's the door that you came in as well over here, and just behind me here, there is an exit as well. Washrooms are located out the door to the left and down the hallway. There's some signage there to follow if you need the washroom. And also, please note that this meeting is being recorded and broadcasted. This will be available to view immediately after this meeting on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and will also be on the Source Control Regulation Bylaw page on Talk Tofino in the coming days. I'd like to just share some expectations for engagement for today. The District of Tofino is committed to listening carefully, fostering respectful discussions, and addressing concerns as transparently as possible. During today's information meeting, there will be zero tolerance for any intimidating, confrontational, or discriminatory language or behavior. Anyone who does not adhere to these expectations may be asked to leave. As participants, you can see on the screen here, we just ask that you treat everyone with respect, listen actively, and allow others to speak, recognize diverse perspectives, engage in dialogue rather than debate, be mindful of time and allow space for all voices, both in person and online, and approach discussions with a willingness to learn from others. We also ask that you just please set your phone to silent or vibrate to minimize any distractions. So today's meeting is meant to provide residents and businesses with information regarding the proposed source control regulation bylaw. This meeting is just one of the methods of public engagement that is being utilized to collect questions and feedback, which will be considered when drafting the final version of the bylaw before it is presented to council for consideration this spring. And with that, I'll give it over to Simon.
Hello there. So today I'm going to do a bit of a high-level walkthrough of some key components of the bylaw. Right now, the bylaw has gone through the first reading through council. Right now, public engagement timeline of that. Following that, there's a second and third reading, and following the third reading is when we would go. Staff would go and get the bylaw enacted with council or adopted. There may be a time that we go second and third reading at once, or we may go to second reading and then have another pause period in between second and third, just depending on any feedback from council or the public that we're in the process of addressing. So background, so source control regulations are typical bylaws for municipalities or regional districts that have wastewater treatment plants and sanitary collection systems. They establish specific requirements and restrictions for discharge of liquid waste into the wastewater collection system / treatment system. This one's being developed in consultation with engineering professionals, environmental professionals, and community members, also utilizing some third-party, some legal advice as well as we move through the various steps in development of this bylaw. Staff shared publicly in 2007 during the liquid waste management planning process and identified the need of a source control regulation bylaw upon on or around operation of when the wastewater treatment plant went into operation. So what's a source control regulation bylaw? It outlines what can and cannot be discharged into municipal sanitary sewer systems. It provides guidelines for how liquid waste is handled prior to it reaching treatment facilities or entering into the collection system, to help maintain clean water and reduce environmental impact of pollution. Also thereby helping whichever municipality achieve its regulations underneath its operating permit or wastewater discharge permit, depending on what province or regulation you're under. And specifically to Tofino, it also helps protect a $79.5 million investment in a facility, and over the long term will help mitigate the impact of operating expenses throughout the service life of this asset. Pre-treatment. So pre-treatment is something that may be required at the source. So where a business or potentially residents or whichever may be required following type of the business, yes, depending on the type of waste and the effluent characteristics and how they correlate to table A, B, and C, which is in Schedule A of the first reading version of the bylaw. Some industries that may require pre-treatment could be industrial waste, liquid waste from restaurants and or hotels, potentially waste from laundry facilities, and wastewater that has high pH or temperature. Some common pre-treatment methods prior to discharge into the collection system could be sedimentation tanks or clarifiers to remove solids, grease traps and or oil separators to remove grease and oils, chemical neutralization or precipitation to remove hazardous chemicals and or heavy metals, filtration systems to remove particulates and debris, pH adjustments to bring wastewater to within acceptable limits, and wastewater treatment, so form of a wastewater treatment plant at a facility to help bring the effluent into the parameters that are identified within the source control regulation bylaw itself. For example of various types of liquid waste, we have domestic waste, so waste that would commonly be discharged into the sanitary collection system from a residence. We have non-domestic waste, which typically would be your commercial establishments such as restaurants and hotels, so on and so forth. With domestic waste, some different types of non-domestic waste, depending on the industry and the characteristics of the liquid waste, may fall into a restricted waste category or a prohibited waste category. We've listed some examples of what may fall under those respective categories. So with restricted and or prohibited waste, there are, well, for restricted waste, there are waste discharge permits that may be issued to the discharger. And there's constraints that are put into these permits to ensure that the discharger is meeting its regulatory requirements and thereby helping the district meet its regulatory requirements. So generally, these are required by any individual, business, or organization that discharges wastewater and or pollutants that may cause detrimental impact to the operation of the wastewater treatment plant facility. The permit provides information on the total quantity and qualitative requirements on the effluent flows into the district system. The permit would have monthly reporting requirements that the discharger would be required to provide the district. The permit will also allow for district inspections of pre-treatment facility and audit sampling at any time. Prohibited waste is not allowed to be discharged into the district sanitary system. Restricted waste would be allowed to be discharged into the district sanitary system in accordance with the permit holder's applicable waste discharge permit in terms that are listed therein. Compliance. So the district's committed to taking a collaborative approach with partners and stakeholders in achieving compliance with the new permit application process and requirements. as this is a brand new bylaw that this municipality has never had in place before. Staff will be looking at helping dischargers come into compliance and finding means of them to get there. Fees will be established in parallel with the final bylaw reading, so the actual value of the fees are not fully developed at this time. Non-compliance would result in letters followed by fines if the non-compliances are not addressed in reasonable timeframes that staff would be setting forth. So staff will be wanting to take a more of an educative approach to help dischargers come into compliance with this forthcoming bylaw. And with that, that's an overview of what the intent of the permit is. And just be open to taking any questions or feedback from the public at this time.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we'll just take questions in person first, and if there's any online, we'll follow up with them after. So if anybody, you're just welcome to raise your hands.
The fees for compliance, is that for the permit or is that a fee for a fine?
It would be both. So there's an application that a discharger would fill out, and part and parcel, there would be an application fee followed by somewhat of a fee to maintain that permit on whatever basis is determined, likely a yearly basis. And then there would be a fine schedule as well that would coincide with not only just the permit, but also any discharger. So if a non-permit holder was discharging something that would fall under the restricted or prohibited waste and did not have a permit, there would be a fee structure that would accommodate that type of a situation. That answers the question. Thank you.
Online?
No one signed up for questions online this video.
Any other questions or comment in person?
So we made a fairly detailed submission. I'm just wondering when we're gonna hear back a response for how those concerns are going to be addressed. Like, is this the place to talk about that, or?
I think this is the place where there would be questions that are asked about the permit and the contents of the permit. If there's feedback that has been sent and addressed to council, this is not the forum that we would be discussing feedback on any correspondence to council. This is a public information session, consultation period, with respect to this bylaw specifically.
Yeah, so I guess my concern is the fish plant, the Cermak fish plant. And I think it probably puts Tofino in a fairly unique situation, like the creative salmon plant is discharging into the ocean. There's a fish plant at Browns Bay processing farm fish, and that goes, I believe, directly into the ocean. It'll be the Ministry of Environment. There must be fish plants over in Richmond. I don't know if they're going into municipal sewage systems, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that this is probably the only fish plant in the province that's going through a municipal wastewater treatment plant. I'm not sure about that, but I wouldn't be surprised. And so I think that puts Tofino in a unique position, unfortunately, because you've done such great work on this thing. But I am very concerned about the potential for pathogens to make it through this system. And I don't feel that it is the responsibility of the District of Tofino to, it's obviously we can't be discharging pathogens, but I don't think it should be our responsibility to pay for, cleaning them up. So I personally think it would be desirable to have the company required to make sure that their effluent has, certainly with PRV, 0 PRV in the effluent before it hits the system, with a port right at the property line so that it can be tested, that they could pay for that testing and ensure the public and the district that they're not putting PRV into our wastewater treatment system. And I mentioned PRV because, as you know, it's extremely difficult to kill. It's a very virulent virus that is really hard to kill. So the Browns Bay treatment was killing about 99% of the virus. And then when they put, juvenile salmon into that effluent, they were contracting PRV from the effluent. So even 1% was still causing problems. And specifically with Chinook, as they migrate north from California, Oregon, Washington, down island, they're not going offshore, they're staying in the bays and going along shore. So what we're finding, that studies have shown that the pathogen load in wild Chinook around here is quite a bit higher because they're spending the winter in these bays with all these farms. So, there is a risk of exposing any Chinook that originated south of here with these viruses that they can then take north and spread all the way up the coast and then all the way out into the Pacific when they go to the thing out there. So just be curious to hear any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from the lens of this permit or this bylaw, don't really have too many thoughts that I can really get into with respect to the topic that you're bringing up. There's regulatory requirements that the District of Tofino must meet with respect to its operating certificate that it holds with the Ministry of Environment. Currently, we are operating the wastewater treatment plant, and the wastewater treatment plant is being operated in compliance with the operating certificate that the District of Tofino holds with the Ministry of Environment. So I'm just, unfortunately, I don't have any feedback to add to the specifics that you're speaking to at this time.
All right, so eventually, I guess we will hear back. Your council.
Yeah, if there's correspondence that's been provided to council, then council would be responding to the correspondence that has been provided to council.
Thanks, honey.
Yeah, no problem. If that answers the question. Yes.
So the district is in compliance. Does it require testing of the effluent?
Yes, there's regular testing that the district does on a weekly basis. And some of the testing is on a quarterly basis, some of it's on an annual basis.
What's being tested for?
We are testing, I don't have our operating certificate in front of me, but we're testing for fecal coliform count or TSS and biological oxygen, BOD, biological oxygen demand.
That certificate is online as well for reference.
Yeah.
TSS is total suspended solids.
That's correct. Yeah. And that is a public document, the operating certificate, so I'm not sure if we have a link to it on Talk to Fino, but it is available for the public to view.
Does that list what's being tested and the amounts that are being found?
The reporting documents or like the actual, I think I'd have to get back to you on that kind of a question. So I'll make a note of that, and then we can respond like with the feedback and the results of the community engagement. We can get back to you about the actual lab results posting, but those are sent to the Ministry of Environment on a weekly basis.
That's just those three things that are being tested for.
There's a couple other things that are also tested, for example, and I don't have the permit right here in front of me. I didn't bring it with me, but for example, with the biosolids, we're testing for metallic contents and various other nutrients and components of the solids, and there may be a couple more liquid tests that are completed or analyzed for in the laboratory.
So might those other ones include diseases or parasites or viruses?
Like I said, I'll just have to take a look at what the operating certificate does say, and I would encourage the public to do that as well. I just don't have that in front of me, so I don't want to start talking about what it does or doesn't say without having a document in front of me. That answers the question?
Yeah. Others?
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering, if it would be possible to draft this bylaw in such a way that farm fish pathogens are prohibited.
We can receive that as feedback and then, as a part of our feedback, maybe we can provide some written response to that. So is that the query is?
Yeah, could, I would like to see farm fish pathogens classified as prohibited waste, not restricted. And in particular, like there's lots of pathogens out there. I'm not a scientist, but I do know that PRV, Piscine orthoreovirus, is one that's of grave concern to scientists, and it's, the other one is Tenixibaculum, which I believe is a bacteria.
I've taken some notes in response there, but if there's some specifics, I would invite the public to send their feedback in through the links and the engagement emails that are on Talk to Pheno, and then staff can take that written feedback and consider that and then get back to the regular.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Any others? Is there any online, Keegan?
Going online at this time.
We switch back to the slides.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll wrap up. Okay. Last minute questions? I think we're good. I'll just get to you, just do it, Keegan. Perfect. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, feedback from this session, along with other feedback provided through Talk to Pheno and through email to Simon or correspondence to council, is all considered and presented to council for consideration in the final draft of the bylaw that will be presented at some point this spring. So for any other information regarding the bylaw and to stay up to date with the process, I'm sure all you have been in tune with Talk to Pheno, the QR codes there along with the URL. The info sheets that you have as well all have the links to Talk to Pheno. And with that, thank you so much for coming and joining our session this evening. And again, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. And appreciate you guys coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay, mute mic.